Hello, my name is Susan Kouzel, and I am a registered dietitian and also the nutrition director at Prosperity Eating Disorders and Wellness Center in Herndon, Virginia. Um, Today, I wanted to talk mostly about something that's come up actually quite a lot this past month with my clients, which is what is happening in my body in eating disorder recovery. Um, Now, this could be like a 40-part series, and those who know me know I could talk way too long about this, or not long enough, depending on how much you care. So, perspective. So, I'm specifically focusing this series, part one, which is why I call it part one, on healing from restrictive eating behaviors. And the spotlight is on GI discomfort. So often people who are struggling with eating disorders, it's like there's a wall. I don't have a green screen, so I'm going to keep disappearing. But it's like there's a wall between their mind and their body, where their mind is deciding what's okay, what's not okay, what to eat, and when, and how they should feel about themselves as a result of those choices. And oftentimes the body has something very different in mind in terms of what it needs. And that discrepancy can result in a lot of turmoil and guilt and shame and food rules and just stuff that pops up for people. And the eating disorder loves to latch on to what I'm just going to refer to as I told you so's. And so if you're at in a space where you feel like you are recovering and healing from restricting your food intake and trying to get back to normalizing your eating behaviors and eating enough and eating more freely, in a way that is health promoting for you, and you're feeling physically so unwell and uncomfortable as you're navigating getting back into eating more, the eating disorder can tend to say, like, see, I told you, you can't possibly eat normally, or eat enough, or eat the foods you enjoy without feeling really uncomfortable or without something really bad happening to you. And I think it's really important for us to have information on what is going on in our bodies, because nobody likes to be told what to do without being told why. It's hard enough to enter into eating disorder treatment or to try to dismantle the rules that chronic dieting has laid in your head. And if we're blindly navigating physiological responses to these things, I think that just sets us up for more anxiety and distress. So I'm hopeful that this video will be helpful for people who are trying to heal from restricting their intake, trying to be able to have food take up less space in their heads and in their lives, and dealing with some physical responses to that, namely gastrointestinal responses to that, and wanting to know, like, okay, how and why should I push forward? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Common GI symptoms: bloating, early satiety, so feeling really full early on. Now, people in eating disorder recovery can go from feeling ravenously hungry to no hunger cues at all, and then back in a matter of 20 minutes. So, this idea of just listen to your body and just go to intuitive eating is oftentimes not accessible right away, or especially for people in the earlier stages of healing their relationship with food. Constipation, diarrhea, nausea, this list could be a lot longer. I just figured I'd keep it concise and like the 5 that I probably see the most often. So why? Like, why many people ask, like, why is my body screaming at me that I'm doing something wrong? And my dietitian or my doctors or my treatment team and my family are telling me I'm doing something right. Um, so we're going to go through a list of what might be going on. When your body is in a state of malnutrition, it is so smart that I need to stop moving my hands. Okay. I'm not going to cut that out. I'm just going to keep that in because I don't know how to edit videos. So you're getting what you're getting. Your body is so smart that it creates a really strategic priority system. So what that means is we're going to protect the heart and the most important parts of the brain, and a lot of other things are getting put on the back burner. So making enough hormones, we don't have time for that. Making new hair follicles, nope, we don't have time for that. Keeping our body temperature where it is, nope, let's lower it to save energy. Digestive enzymes, we absolutely don't have enough energy to make that a priority. So I cannot count on my fingers and toes how many times people have been like, well, I used to be able to have X food, but now I just don't tolerate it, in eating disorder recovery, specifically recovering from restrictive eating behaviors. So I'll use the example of lactaid milk. It is not that lactaid milk does not contain lactose. It is that lactaid milk contains the lactase enzyme. So they literally put the enzyme into the milk. So for people who are lactose intolerant, they can digest the milk because the enzyme is being put into the milk, the enzyme that their body isn't creating. So similarly, people who are not creating digestive enzymes might experience gastrointestinal distress from a variety of different foods. And again, the eating disorder comes in with a case of the I told you so's of like, I told you if you eat this food, you're going to feel sick. That must mean it's bad for you. That must mean you can't have it. No, oftentimes that means your body is healing. Again, this is barring any actual allergies or intolerances. This is more in the context of people who say, like, I used to be able to eat this food and then my eating disorder started, and now that I'm trying to recover, I can't anymore. So it's likely not that you won't be able to have that food. It's that we need to continue to work to gradually incorporate it as your body is healing. I also just want to normalize bloating and physical discomfort in the recovery process. Bloating, first of all, is a normal human experience, but it can feel like it's increased tenfold in the recovery process from restrictive eating behaviors, which again makes the eating disorder come in with like, I told you so. You're just going to feel more miserable, more physically, mentally, emotionally uncomfortable if you keep moving towards recovery. So we might as well stop. Again, the eating disorder will do everything in its power to try to make you feel as though you're doing something wrong by moving towards letting it go. I don't know a better analogy for this or metaphor or the phrase, but the idea that things scream as they're dying, the eating disorder gets louder as you are not listening to it as much. Okay. Dysbiosis essentially refers to an imbalance of our gut microbacteria. So the gut microbiome, the gut-brain connection, I'm sure all of you have perhaps heard people talk about that. I know it's been a big topic of conversation in like the wellness community, but there's a ton of research behind the gut brain being like the second brain. And this communication pathway is bidirectional, meaning our brain communicates to our gut and our gut communicates back to our brain. So when somebody is not eating enough for an extended period of time, oftentimes the good bacteria in our GI tract decreases in terms of variety and in terms of amount. So this can absolutely be a symptom of malnutrition. And at the end, I'll kind of talk about what we can do with all of this, like some action points, because I know there's nothing worse than being told, like, this is why this is happening. Okay, bye. That's not what we're going to do. First, we're going to go through the reasons, and then we're going to talk about how to support yourself through the healing process. Delayed gastric emptying. I feel like gastroparesis is probably the diagnosis I've seen the most from my clients who have gone to see a GI doctor. And what this means is everything is slowed. And a lot of times we see this as, obviously we feel like this is our body working against us. If we're feeling so physically uncomfortable and bloated and crampy and there's just so much going on. In fact, this is our body's way of trying to protect us when we're undernourished, by slowing everything down to absorb every last nutrient that we can. So this can absolutely be a side effect of restrictive eating behaviors. Also, the longer that food sits in our GI tract, in our colon, the bacteria in our gut ferment our food, and this can create gas. And so the longer that our food is sitting in our GI tract, the more opportunity there is for that to happen. There is also, I switched slides too soon. There is also some research that that points to digestion being slowed up to 50%, specifically in anorexia nervosa, which is a restrictive eating disorder. So, malnutrition in general can cause muscle breakdown, which decreases the size of our stomach and overall peristalsis. So, peristalsis is essentially the muscle contractions that move food from our stomach all the way down. So, when you swallow, the muscles in your throat move the food down, and then it just continues from your stomach to your small intestine to your large intestine. And so when this process is weakened, we can actually experience motility issues. So it might not necessarily be that somebody is not eating enough fiber, which I hear all the time. There is a very rare syndrome. I've seen it total of 2 times, and I have worked in the PHP, IOP, and outpatient levels of care in eating disorder treatment since 2016. So it's been about little over 7 years now. Just for context, I've seen probably on average 20 plus clients per week during that time frame. So it is rare. But in this syndrome, SMA syndrome, the superior mesenteric artery pushes on the small intestine. So everyone has that artery, and then everyone, okay. So there is a pad of body fat that kind of separate these two things. In some cases of malnutrition, that goes away and the artery pushes on the small intestine. So some people actually report really intense, sharp pain in their stomach area that is brought on and exacerbated by eating. The fortunate or unfortunate, I guess, depending on your perspective, case is that this is primarily healed by eating enough, by weight restoration, by restoring that natural body fat that our body is supposed to have. And the reason I say unfortunately is because many people, I think any human being, if they're experiencing pain or discomfort, they really want like a quick solution. I think it's important to be said that this syndrome exists outside of eating disorders. So obviously see your primary care physician, who will likely refer you to a GI doctor. People who I've worked with who have experienced this issue have found that within a few weeks of weight restoration, they have felt better. Um, that is obviously a case-by-case basis. Anxiety. Ooh. This could be a whole video in itself of the gut-brain connection, but essentially, imagine you're being chased by a bear and your body has to choose where to allocate its energy. It is much more appropriate for survival for your body to say, screw digestion, we're gonna get out of here. Like we're gonna go and run. So this is really, I feel like, a sensitive subject because I think it can get really gaslighty if someone's saying, my stomach really hurts. Like, I'm in so much pain. I'm doing my best to eat. Or, like, I'm absolutely terrified of eating. I don't want to do this, but, like, I'm still showing up. Or I am just in, like, every time I have an interpersonal conflict or a test coming up at school, I feel like I can't eat. I completely lose hunger cues. I feel like it can get a little gaslighty if people say, like, no, your stomach doesn't hurt, that's just anxiety. Not helpful at all. Um, the reason I want to bring this up is because that bidirectional pathway of gut communicating to brain and vice versa is extremely important in that we can use it as a tool, versus a reason to say we're going to not acknowledge your physical symptoms. So I'll just give some examples. I've had people who say, when I have interpersonal conflict, or if I have a test coming up at school that I'm really nervous about, or I have to give a presentation at work, I immediately feel it in my stomach. I immediately feel like I'm not hungry, or I can't possibly eat enough to feel satisfied, or I feel physically ill, nauseous, stomach cramping, etc. This is very valid in that many people feel their anxiety in their body. And some people feel it in their chest. Like, I feel like I can't breathe fully. Some people feel it in their back. Like, anxiety can communicate to the body, like, we are in fight or flight mode. We don't have time to digest food. Let's get out of this situation that we're in. And so hunger cues can decrease. People can feel like it's way harder to eat a meal. Again, at the end, we'll go through kind of a step-by-step based on each of these slides of, okay, what do I do with this information? Fiber. Okay. Anybody who has had experiences with constipation specifically, which is one of the more common GI symptoms I see in people with restrictive eating disorders, is just eat enough fiber. So just have some prunes, you'll be fine. Just have X amount of fruits or vegetables per day. And the problem is that in our kind of health and wellness society, and I know diet culture is a term that's used really often. In diet culture, which, spoiler alert, we all live in, is this idea that we are entirely responsible for our health. What we do or don't eat has a moral value placed on it. So we're either being good or we're bad, or food is good or bad, or healthy or unhealthy. This idea that I have to have all the fruits and vegetables and all the whole grains, and that is the healthiest way for me to eat. And while fruits and vegetables and whole grains are wonderful and health promoting, sometimes our clients who are healing have too many fruits and vegetables, too many whole grains, because they are safer foods for them, because they are conventionally more healthy according to diet culture. Now, this again is another video in itself, but I'll just give one example of this. Our bodies are not capable of making the judgments on our food choices that our brains are. Specifically, when you have an eating disorder and your brain is telling you that this is healthy, this is unhealthy, this is okay, this is not, if that's how your eating disorder manifests. Plenty of clients that I've seen have received advice on how to be healthy. Oftentimes that is advice based in this idea that our body is super judgmental of our food choices and is able to categorize this is healthy, this isn't, this is good for you, this isn't. We tend to put a moral value on that of I cannot count how many times I in my own life have heard I'm being good or I'm being bad as it pertains to food choices. This changes decade by decade, but currently in our culture, fiber is talked about a lot of how do you get enough fiber. And I think it's important to be said that fiber is awesome, fiber is so important, and many of my clients are eating too much fiber for a healing body. So for many people, my initial intervention is to actually decrease their fiber, start low and go slow. Add just a little bit at a time. There is some research that 30 plants per week. So this idea of like 4 to 5 a day of fruits or vegetables or legumes can be really health promoting for that gut-brain connection and restoring the gut microbiome. But the key is that they are not undernourished. Because throwing a bunch of cruciferous vegetables in a GI tract that has not been used to properly digesting food is a recipe for more bloating, discomfort, gas, eating disorder, I told you so's, just overall unhelpful. So a lot of this is about getting back to a place that feels comfortable physically, mentally, emotionally, in the absence of the eating disorders opinion. If that makes any sense. I'm going to cut that part out. That makes sense to me. Okay. What do you do with all this information? Meal timing. I recommend not going longer than 3 hours without eating. Not just to people in eating disorder recovery, but honestly to most people. And again, life happens. There are times when life happens. Our glycogen stores deplete about every few hours. So typically that is when, if our hunger cues are appropriately firing, they will start asking for more food. Macronutrient balance. This is really important. I feel like this is important in terms of additive eating. So if we are focused on how do we get enough of everything versus what should we have less of or not have, it cultivates a much more life-giving, health-promoting, balanced relationship with food. That we've got all of the food groups at your meals, and we've got frequent snacks in between, 3 of them. Vagus nerve work, again, this could be a video in itself, and I would probably not be the best person to lead it, but what I do know to be true is that our brains and our guts are extremely connected, and that the vagus nerve is that bidirectional pathway of stomach to brain and vice versa. And one technique that does have a lot of evidence to support it is called square breathing, which is that you inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. And the idea is that you do that for as long as you need to before a meal. If a meal is something you're anxious about, or before an anxiety provoking situation, for it to feel like it's physiologically calming you down. Does not mean that your thoughts will go away, or the anxiety that was initially plaguing you prior to breathing will be eradicated. It just means that it regulates your central nervous system to be in more of a rest and digest space than a fight or flight space. I've found with many of my clients that when they first start trying the square breathing, they need to do it like 30 to 40 minutes before a meal and just like practice and focus on it for that amount of time, or before the anxiety provoking situation, whether that's a meal or not. And then the more that they practice it, the more that they're able to kind of like drop in, for lack of a better term, to that space quicker. So, say in the beginning, you're doing that 30 to 40 minutes before an anxiety provoking scenario, and you're really trying to work on it like on and off throughout that time frame. And then eventually you get to the point where 2 to 5 minutes before that situation, you start your breath work and you start to feel a little bit more physiologically calm and thus a little bit more capable of showing up with maybe some of the logic or fact checking that is helpful for you. If logic and fact checking has never been helpful for you, then more so just I am physically in a calmer state to address the situation and maybe respond versus react. Adequate hydration is really important because constipation is one of the most common symptoms I see in people recovering from restrictive eating behaviors. And this does not just mean water. Many of those people, if you're someone who feels like you are recovering from a restrictive eating disorder and have to pee every 30 minutes, or way more frequently than maybe your peers, if you are someone who feels consistently thirsty, oftentimes hydration status is not just the amount of water you're taking in, but also your electrolytes. And if you are malnourished, your electrolyte stores are depleted. But some sort of electrolyte water can actually be a really helpful addition to the meal plan or the treatment plan of someone who is experiencing specifically constipation. Gut microbiome, we talked about start low, go slow, 30 plants per week. Once you get to the point where you are eating enough overall calories, enough carbs, fats, and proteins. Plenty of people, I'm going to kind of combine caloric beverages and bang for your buck. Plenty of people, when they get to the point where they recognize, like, okay, my body needs more than what I initially thought it did to heal, which that is very often the case, is like, okay, my body needs more than I thought it did. I typically say the more bang for your buck, so by that I mean the more nutrition for less volume, the better. And oftentimes with beverages that have nutrition, so outside of water, we're talking about like milk or juice, chocolate milk, smoothies, to start with those earlier on in the meal. If you are experiencing early satiety or feeling full early on in a meal, it does not mean chug your beverage and then eat your food. It just means try to have a little bit more of that closer to the beginning of your meal. Lastly, weight restoration. There is a metric ton of research that supports the mental, physical, and emotional healing of people recovering from restrictive eating disorders when they reach their biologically appropriate weight. Again, I'm going to make a whole nother trillion videos, but this could be a really long one. And I also know that this topic is very loaded in people who are struggling. I think it's important just to state the research shows that if weight restoration is part of your journey of healing your relationship with food, and for many people it is, whether you are at a normal, please see my aggressive finger quotes, normal weight according to BMI or some other arbitrary standard or not, many times if you have to engage in restrictive eating behaviors in order to maintain your current weight, chances are weight restoration of getting your body back to its biologically appropriate state is a part of your treatment plan. And the reason I bring this up is because I know a hallmark of many restrictive eating disorders is this fear of gaining weight. There's also a ton of research that points to anxiety being the highest at 90 to 95% weight restoration to biologically appropriate weight for people recovering from restrictive eating disorders, which is kind of tracks, right, with this like initial treatment buy-in of like, okay, I get that I need help, I get that I'm not feeling my best, and then getting to the point where you've been doing it for long enough and your body maybe is changing and maybe that doesn't feel comfortable at all, and your brain is like, nope, we're out. I know that facts and logic do not take away emotion and trauma and history and experiences. So my goal in making this video is only, the hope is to provide some level of fact basis, to provide just a little bit of mental ammo when those thoughts get really loud, to help keep pushing forward, knowing that there is freedom on the other side of this physical, mental, emotional discomfort and distress. Okie dokie. So I think that's all I have. I would love to make more of these videos about all of this, so I would be more than willing to hear feedback on what you all would like to hear more about. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful night, and I am going to try to stop this recording if I can figure out how. Okay, bye-bye.